Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This is Maddie Kohler with NASEO. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen in on some rebate program updates and some innovative approaches to program design and launch. Before we get started, I just wanted to flag for everybody that we are recording this meeting and we're planning on posting it on the NASEO website. If you have any objections, please message me and let me know when we can refrain from posting it if that's an issue for folks. So I hope you guys will engage, ask questions, share your comments. Feel free to use the chat or the raise your hand feature. Also, if you turn on your camera, I will take that as an indication that you want to share something. So I think that's it from us on the logistics side of things. Excited to turn things over first off to Will in California to set the stage for us and provide some opening remarks.
Thanks for that, Maddie. Just checking again. Audio coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Vicent. I'm calling from the California Energy Commission. That's the state's lead energy policy planning and agency. So first of all, thank you to NASEO and our esteemed presenters here today. I'm truly humbled to be providing some open remarks for this really exciting topic, particularly as I'm sensing a tipping point for labels in the United States. So this is like a really exciting time to have a discussion with some really deep roots in the discussion here. And so many of us have spent a lot of our careers talking about energy concepts. And you know, we've stumbled or fallen flat at Thanksgiving dinners when we try to convince our family members of the importance of all the stuff that we do. And so to me, home energy ratings and labels are really about bringing the masses to the conversation in a topic that is so dear to our heart, and trying to speak a common language to bring along everybody else with us. As far as home energy ratings and labels, we do know that energy and utility costs can often be the second largest expense in a total cost of operation. And that issue can be exacerbated in rental situations where energies and utilities can be an even larger proportion of a renter's expenses. So this topic is extremely important, and it's one that really touches on a main thread of equity and energy poverty. And so for that reason, California is a little bit late to the game, but we are dusting off some authority that we have in the world's fifth largest economy to update our statewide home energy rating and labeling program. This has a requirement to have a reasonable estimate for utility bills, and also provide some energy efficiency recommendations to come along with it. So just in April 30th of this year, the California Energy Commission for California kicked off a proceeding to update the home energy rating and labeling program. And we hope to have a voluntary program in place by 2026. So I think that timing leads itself perfectly for California providing some opening remarks to say, here, we're here to learn from the experts who have lots of experience in this space. And we're very anxious to hear from Department of Energy, South Carolina, and our own cities like Berkeley. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for that. We'll kick things off with the Department of Energy and our great colleague, Gilly. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to keep my camera off just for a moment. My audio is getting a little choppy. So can y'all still hear me okay?
Yes, sounds good.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. If I don't know you yet, my name is Gilly Plog. I am with the Building Technologies Office at the Department of Energy, and I manage the Home Energy Score program. And today I'll be talking to you a bit about manufactured housing and multifamily updates that are coming. Next slide, please. And we can skip this one. I'm going to briefly touch on this just because I know that many of you on the call are already familiar with the Home Energy Score. But in 2012, DOE launched Home Energy Score to give homeowners, buyers, and renters a low-cost, reliable method to understand a home's energy efficiency. And the goal from the outset's always been to build market value for home energy efficiency through our standardized data and metrics that are applicable to all existing homes. Our current target markets are existing single-family homes and townhomes, but at the end of the month, we are slated to launch our manufactured and multifamily modeling updates, which I will get into a little bit later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So as most of you know, home energy score is an asset rating that seeks to quantify the energy efficiency of a building based solely upon the inherent components of the house. The scoring tool captures data on insulation levels, heating equipment, things like that, but does not take into account thermostat settings, appliances, or plug loads because the energy used to operate these components can vary widely depending on occupant behavior. The pyramid with the dashed box within it is how the scoring tool defines home assets. And that allows homes to be compared on an apples to apples basis because it compares houses to one another based on their assets and not how occupants operate those houses. The graphic on the right shows an example of the first page of a home energy score report, which includes 3 things: the score itself, facts about the home and its estimated energy use, and recommendations to improve the home. Again, and I'll say this a million times, but scoring a 1 does not mean that your home is poorly built, and scoring a 10 does not mean that your home cannot improve. Next slide, please. These are just more sample score pages. I think we can skip this one as well as the next. And here, if you're interested in becoming a partner and you are not already, this is an example from the city of Portland, but our reports can be customized by partner organizations to better suit your needs. Next slide, please. So our tool is uniquely refined to require minimal data input that saves on time, money, and training for assessors, while also producing maximum accuracy for energy use predictions. We really like to try and have a balance between data inputs and accuracy. But the way that the score works right now is that a qualified assessor inspects each home on site and enters approximately 50 data points into the online home energy scoring tool. And then the scoring tool will provide a summary of inputs for review and prompts the assessor to create a label. A couple of things to note about the methodology that we use. So for home size, a home's energy use depends on a variety of factors, one of which is its size. So larger homes have more surface area, which translates into greater energy requirements. So a home score is based on estimated annual energy use, not energy use per square foot. So given all other things as equal, a larger home will likely have a lower score than a smaller home. Also to note is the climate of location. Home energy score uses TMY3 or typical meteorological year climate data, and it maps the zip code for the house address to the nearest weather station, and each weather station has its own definition of score bin ranges based on local weather. And if you have more questions on that, feel free to contact me. Next slide, please. So again, we have a value of home energy score at individual and aggregate data levels. Individual reports, like I've shown you, can estimate energy costs and provide recommended upgrades. But at an aggregate level, where there's a concentration of home energy scores in one area, we can get consistent home energy information to understand sector-wide issues and opportunities. Next slide, please. This is just our schema of our score calculation. Again, if you have more questions on this, please feel free to contact me. My email is later on in the slide deck, but let's skip to the next slide, please. So this graph shows home energy use data for the nation based on the Energy Information Administration's Residential Energy Consumption Survey, or RECS. And the home energy scores scale below is stretched to show how homes score based on their energy use, and that's what we call our bins. So if your home scores a 5, it's expected to perform comparably to an average home in the US in terms of energy use. Again, that's climate normalized. If your home score is a 10, it ranks amongst the 10% of homes expected to use the least amount of energy. And I will get into how these bins are updated for our multifamily units. Next slide, please. This is the exciting stuff that we have coming at the end of the month. We will have support for manufactured housing, so mobile homes, single, double, triple wides, support for multifamily housing, primarily for low or mid-rise residential. So that's about 20,000 square feet or less. Those updated scoring bins for single family and new bins for multifamily. We'll also be able to have hourly data file export with API capabilities, but all of this new functionality will require the use of HBXML version 4. And our APIs will still support version 2 point whatever 2 point you're using, but only for traditional single family homes. But as Will was speaking about earlier, energy burden is a huge issue across the US, which can be exacerbated by manufactured housing units' often weak efficiency measures. So less efficient insulation, windows, and heating compared to site-built housing, especially in pre-HUD code homes. A recent study by PNNL that examined attic insulation retrofit needs in manufactured housing found that typical units had R20 or less in the attic. And manufactured units built to HUD code minimum often include walls with R11 insulation, which is obviously would not be allowed for site-built home code compliance for more than 20 years. So the Home Energy Score team and the tool itself wants to help address these issues by quickly pinpointing the most cost-effective ways to update manufactured housing. Currently, some of our partners already use Home Energy Score for manufactured housing, but because of the current modeling data behind the tool, there are additional steps for our partners to take in order to make the tool work for them. With the new update, we've provided better and more accurate manufactured home modeling and made it easier for partners to include manufactured housing in their home energy labeling programs. And again, we are including multifamily, which I will get into the scoring bits in the next slide. But for multifamily, we are looking at the singular dwelling unit, not the whole building. And you can see all of the different modeling assumptions and choices that you have here. Next slide. All right, so these are going to be our updated scoring bins. You can see that we're not only updating our scoring bins for single family homes using more recent residential energy consumption survey data, but also for multifamily. The multifamily scores are obviously far more compressed considering the lower amount of energy usage per multifamily dwelling unit than a single family site-built dwelling unit. So you can't necessarily compare a multifamily score of 5 to a single family score of 5 because these energy usages are far more compressed. And in the next couple of slides, I'll go through what our online scoring tool updates look like. And these are primarily for manufactured, but we could just go ahead and go through those. So next slide, please. You'll see a few changes to our input options, but those options then lead to changes in the modeling. So things like a flat roof, bowstring roof, belly and wing foundation insulation, things like that will be available once you select manufactured home. And there are also different assumptions about the building type. We can go next slide, please. Again, we have single, double, triple wide for manufactured. And then next slide, please. You'll see our different assumptions here, as well as in the next slide. So things will look relatively similar for the multifamily update. It will just ask you to identify which walls are adjacent to other dwelling units and or common areas. And here is obviously a list of our home energy score policies. I have not, unfortunately, updated this to include our most recent list, but would love to have any or all of you on board as partners. But feel free to send me an email. I'm not going to take up any more of our time, but the last slide of all of the slides that I sent you, Alana, sorry, have all of my contact information. Should you want to send me a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gilly, for all of that. There's a few of us who've been eagerly awaiting these updates, so I'm excited to see them come to fruition. Gilly, maybe you want to drop your email in the chat for folks to grab it while we move on to the other presentations.
Will do.
Thanks. And when we get to the discussion towards the end of our panelists, feel free to ask her easy questions too, and we can save the hard ones for her email. Thank you for that. So we're going to zoom in a little bit from the federal level to the state level. We've got two great speakers lined up here from South Carolina. So I will hand things over to them to kick things over and share the very exciting news that's happening in South Carolina.
Great, thanks, Maddie. Yeah, as she mentioned, from the South Carolina Energy Office, and we'll be giving an overview of our South Carolina home energy labeling program today. Next slide, please.
Hey everybody, I'm Burke. I'm working with the South Carolina Energy Office on the home energy labeling program. The concept for the South Carolina home energy labeling program actually came out of the energy efficiency roadmap for the state. And this was a document that was developed through a stakeholder engagement process and set priorities and outlined opportunities for energy efficiency in South Carolina. And one of the recommendations that came out of this process was to consider implementing a home energy labeling program. So that's something that we've been working on since 2021. And we've had a working group running in the state to kind of help us guide that process. Again, coming out of the recommendations from the state's energy efficiency roadmap. Next slide.
So our approach to the South Carolina labeling program is to have a statewide voluntary labeling infrastructure, which is currently in the process of being created to support labeling throughout the state of South Carolina. And as Burke mentioned, we've been having a stakeholder working group to provide input and guidance to program development. Also recently have had EarthVantage come on board to help assist us with program development and management as well. And lastly, our role as the Energy Office is to help provide support for our energy labeling pilot programs in South Carolina, which has been our main next step as part of this program. Next slide, please.
This is a slide we've been using in the working group for a long time. It's probably could get way more complicated and be more accurate, but I think it does a pretty good job of explaining kind of our working group and our program development big picture. So we started at the beginning with the working group talking about what a South Carolina home energy label would look like and kind of investigating what the options were for actually delivering a home label. That led us to getting more involved with DOE Home Energy Score as a tool that we could leverage for South Carolina, and then moving kind of into the administration and customization phase, basically figuring out what would the state of South Carolina actually have to do to, generate DOE Home Energy Score labels for houses in South Carolina. That led to the Energy Office becoming a DOE Home Energy Score partner and bringing on a contractor to help build out the technical aspects of the program. And that contractor is Earth Advantage, who came on board during the summer of this year. We're in the stage now of kind of identifying where we need to provide training and education in the marketplace, both to have qualified assessors ready to service pilot projects, and also to make people aware of what a home energy score or a home energy label is, what's useful about it, how to understand the label, and then also help derive some market demand for people to be interested in getting home energy scores and labels on their homes. Our next phase will take us into actually launching pilot projects next year, where we will have a couple local organizations, I guess I should say, in South Carolina, who will actually be implementing the home energy labeling locally. And we'll be kind of working with them over the next several months to make sure they've got trained assessors available, support, for their local programs to be successful, and actually get labels put on houses. Next slide. We've been having conversations, and Michael and I conducted earlier this month 2 interviews with potential pilot projects in South Carolina. We've got 2 more interviews set up with potential pilot projects, and we are still actively reaching out to organizations and entities asking if they would be interested. And we have had interest in people doing home energy scores, home energy labels in South Carolina from local jurisdictions like cities, utilities and energy co-ops, colleges and universities, energy efficiency organizations, nonprofit organizations, and weatherization agencies. So the interest has been pretty broad, and we're seeing a nice intersection of potential pilot projects that can actually take home energy labeling and integrate it into programs they're already running, that are already touching homes and doing audits and assessments. And then also organizations that are more interested in helping market and promote simply the idea that, hey, you could get a home energy score, you could get your house labeled, you could get access to all of this great information about the energy efficiency upgrades. You could potentially make it your house essentially at very low cost, while also getting the added benefit of a customized home energy score. So we've seen very, very strong kind of across the board interest from our stakeholders. Next slide.
So yeah, just to wrap up here, just a recap or overview of some next steps. So program system design, hope to have that finalized in Q4 of this year. And as Bourke already mentioned, in process of identifying local partners for pilot projects currently and having those discussions. In Q1 of next year, we'll hope to start conducting outreach, and similarly in Q1 and Q2 of next year, begin our training of initial assessors in South Carolina. And our goal as of right now is Q2 of 2025 is to begin the launch of our pilot projects to get that up and running. Next slide, please.
Maddie, we put a slide in here for questions, but if we want to hold questions till the end of all the presentations, that's fine too, and we can skip over this one to contact info.
Yeah, so here's our contact information and link to our home energy labeling program information page. So if you have any additional questions or would like to stay informed, that'd be great. But thank you.
Thank you both. I was keeping my eye out for any sort of like immediate, clarifying questions and didn't see any. So we'll hold off on the discussion for the end of the call. And we're going to take another sort of like step more locally and turn to it and understand how one city is implementing a labeling program and their plans for next steps. We'll go over to the city of Berkeley in California. So over to you.
All right, well, give me 1 second while I share my screen. And then Okay, is that good?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Ammon Reagan. I'm with the City of Berkeley, and I manage our building emission savings ordinance, which includes our home labeling program. We're one of the kind of oldest mandatory home labeling programs in the country. Us in Portland kind of started ours around the same time in 2014, 2015. And so I'll be sharing some information on our current program and then a proposed update that we're bringing to council in the next year. So as everyone knows, Berkeley has ambitious climate action goals, similar to many other cities throughout the country. We're committed to being zero net emissions by 2045 and pledge to become a fossil fuel free city as soon as possible. And we know that buildings are a key part in achieving our goals. In our latest greenhouse gas inventory in 2021, existing buildings were our second largest source of emissions. And this is why we have the Building Emission Savings Ordinance. And so this is Berkeley's main ordinance focused on decarbonizing our existing buildings. And BASO is unique compared to other ordinances in other cities is that it covers every building in the city. So it covers a single family home to a large commercial building, and it operates as two distinct programs. And so we have our time of listing program for buildings less than 25,000 square feet. And then we have our large buildings program for buildings greater than 25,000 square feet with varying requirements for the different building sizes and types. And then today I'll be focusing on our time of listing program. So currently, Berkeley requires an energy and electrification assessment prior to listing a building for sale. And so for single family homes, which is the bulk of our building sales, it's a home energy score. And the intent behind BASO is to provide buyers and owners with information on how to decrease their building's emissions, energy use, and utility costs with the hope that buyers would voluntarily complete upgrades. And over the last 8 years since we've had BASO, only a small number of homeowners have taken action. And we need many more buildings to start reducing their emissions in order to reach our climate action goals. So different cities and jurisdictions operate their home energy score program differently. In Berkeley, we have a regional home energy score partner, BayREN, that covers the entire Bay Area. They train assessors, maintain our home energy score database, and do the QA/QC for the assessments that come in. This allows Berkeley to utilize the regional program, so we only have to administer our local home labeling requirements. And having that regional program helps alleviate a lot of the workload and costs on a city to develop home energy score requirements. So for some context on impacts so far, since the launch of our program in 2015, we've had about 4,200 assessments, which is about 500 assessments per year, and an average score of 4.5. We don't have any assessors in-house in the city. We use third-party assessors, about 13 companies and 28 assessors that do the work throughout the city with a compliance rate around 90%. Both Berkeley and the Bay Area are focused on moving buildings off fossil fuels to clean electricity. So our regional program created an electrification checklist, which is appended to the home energy score. So this allows assessors to collect additional information focused on electrification, such as panel capacity and space requirements for heat pumps. And that allows assessors to kind of customize the recommendations for electrification. And that goes into our custom report. And I know it was brought up earlier in the call that every program can have a different style report. Ours is definitely a bit more focused on electrification. And so this is an example of our local report, and it provides more information to homeowners on how to electrify their building and the emission savings and energy savings from either completing envelope improvements only or for full electrification. So one of the biggest lessons we've learned for us is that mandatory energy information disclosure helps new homeowners understand their energy use, but it doesn't equal upgrades, or at least for us. And I want to caveat that Berkeley is unique. We have both a temperate climate, which means we don't have high heating and cooling loads, and our housing market is expensive. And so the average home price in Berkeley is about $1.5 million. So energy costs are a small fraction of most new homeowners' expenses. And so this combination provides less incentive for building owners to voluntarily make upgrades. This is not the case to most cities. Home labeling and disclosure is a really valuable tool to help new buyers and renters understand what their energy costs and energy burden will be. But in Berkeley, the goal of BASO is really to drive down emissions in our buildings. A lot of cities have requirements for large buildings, such as building performance standards, and large buildings do account for a significant chunk of emissions and as a small number of buildings. However, in Berkeley, we still have about 35% of our emissions come from that small residential sector. And there's a lot more buildings. And so we need to start working on ways to decarbonize now, since it'll take time to hit all those buildings. So now I'm going to talk through kind of what are the next steps for our program. And so right now we just have the home energy score labeling requirement at listing, but we are proposing to put together requirements for 1 to 4 unit buildings. So we are proposing to maintain the current assessment requirement, which would be completed by a seller. And if upgrades are needed, a buyer would have 2 years after the sale to complete the upgrades. And so to determine which upgrades are required, we're proposing a flexible resilience standard. So this is where there's a list of possible upgrade measures and options, and each measure would have a corresponding credit value based on the emission savings, the costs, and other resilience metrics. And then buildings would need to achieve a minimum number of credits by completing upgrades. Flexibility is very important. Every home is different and one size doesn't fit all. And so when we worked with the technical advisory committee, there was no consensus on what specific requirements we should make. And so that's why we came up with, the idea to have a full list that allows homeowners to choose. And they can, this can accommodate the range of building conditions and the range of buyers' interests. And so buyers can prioritize which upgrades to complete in their home first. So here's a list of potential measures that we have developed with the Technical Advisory Committee. It includes electrification measures, resilience, and energy efficiency measures. Full compliance would be set around the biggest emission savings and resilience measures, such as heat pumps, replacing knob and tube, or installing solar and storage. It also includes electric-ready measures, such as upgrading panel and pre-wiring. So installing a heat pump in the future, it would be an easy switch. The proposed flexible resilience standards carries a lot of benefits for homeowners, in addition to helping us achieve our climate action goals. Some upgrades, such as insulation or heat pump systems, will improve comfort and indoor air quality and protect our residents from extreme heat and wildfire smoke events. Many of the measures increase safety by limiting the need for combustive gas in our homes and replacing old wiring. And some upgrades, such as installing solar or completing envelope improvements, can reduce utility bills. And ultimately, our goal is to get people to reduce their building's emissions. And in Berkeley, gas, water heating, and space heating are the bulk of our building emissions. So we've included heat pumps as an exemption pathway for building. And so our proposal would allow building owners and buyers to avoid additional upgrades if they have at least one heat pump system in the home. And so we want owners to start transitioning heat pumps now, since there's a lot of incentives and rebates available for that transition. And so with this exemption pathway, a homeowner could install one when their system burns out, so then they're compliant for a future sale. And so we are keeping the home energy score as a key part of the program. So the home energy score will help buyers determine which upgrades to complete and which ones are recommended. The city can also use that home energy score to confirm if there's a heat pump and provide that exemption. And then homes that receive a high score will have a lower target to achieve, and so they won't need to complete as many upgrades. And so I'll quickly walk through some scenarios of how that home sale process would work in Berkeley. So in the case that a home doesn't have a heat pump, the seller would complete an assessment. It would verify the building's conditions and current systems and provide a list of potential upgrade options. That assessment is disclosed to all buyers. The home is then listed for sale, and then funds to cover the upgrades would be set aside at closing through an escrow deposit process. And then after the sale, the buyer would have 2 years to complete the upgrades, achieve those minimum number of credits, and utilize those funds that were set aside. And then if a home has a heat pump, the seller would still need to complete that assessment. That assessment would verify they have a heat pump and also provide next steps for full electrification if they choose to do so. Homes listed for sale, and once sold, property is compliant and no further upgrades would be needed. And finally, we're proposing some additional exemptions and support. I won't go through all of them, but a key one that I wanted to bring up is that we are putting in a exemption for first-time home buyers that are participating in an income-qualified home buying program or down payment assistance program. So final key takeaways of our proposed update. So we are still in the process of bringing it to council and hope to bring it in within the next 6 months. This only applies to buildings and units that are being sold. sellers are not required to complete upgrades. Homes can still sell as is. And in our market, buyers are purchasing a $1.5 million home. They can budget kind of the cost of these upgrades with their other renovations that they're doing. One of the key things is the flexible upgrade options allows buyers to choose, and then the various exemption pathways for having a heat pump system or for first-time home buyers. And so kind of the goal of this is to really improve the comfort and safety and resilience of our homes while also being able to tackle emissions from the small residential sector. And there's my contact information, and I think these slides will be shared at the end. So if you have any questions on our program or want to reach out, feel free to.
Yeah, happy to share slides and contact information for everybody. Thank you for those presentations. We're going to transition now into the discussion. Please, I'll kick things off with a few questions, but if folks want to add any thoughts to the chat, raise your hand, turn on your camera, that would be great. But I'll start first with you to sort of like reflect on what Berkeley's doing. What has the reaction been so far to these proposals?
Yeah, so another unique piece for Berkeley is that we've had a time of sale policy in place since the 1980s. And so we had the Residential Energy Conservation Ordinance, which required homes to complete 11 minimal energy efficiency measures, such as attic insulation, replacing light bulbs, putting on low flow faucets. It was very prescriptive. So we had that in place from the 1987 to 2015. And so we switched from kind of requiring those prescriptive upgrades to doing this assessment style, hoping that the assessment would lead to voluntary upgrades. But then it was become evident that we need to kind of bring requirements back. And so I would say, because we've had a policy in place for decades, it's a little easier in our kind of political climate and with realtors to kind of move back to requirements. The flexibility has been really helpful, rather than having a prescriptive, set of options. The flexibility allows for, varying budgets, and for kind of different interests. And so that's been helpful.
Great, thanks. I'm going to kind of bop around to all of our speakers with the questions I have. I want to turn now to South Carolina for either of you that want to jump in. I'm curious to hear what you're hoping to learn from these pilot programs. Is there a vision for how these might be permanent programs in the long term? Like, what are your research questions, I guess?
I guess I can start and then Bert can chime in. But I think we really just hope to learn how these different organizations envision how they can implement home energy labeling into their programs. Like Burke mentioned, we've had a couple of different conversations and they've been able to kind of give an overview of how they think they could use home energy labeling as part of their current efforts. So I think that's what in our beginning phases of doing research and engaging with potential pilot projects, that's what we're really trying to learn right now, if that makes sense.
And I would add to that by just saying, I think in contrast to what's going on in Berkeley, in South Carolina, the state doesn't have any, way to make people go out and do home energy labeling. What we are building is a voluntary infrastructure that anyone can use to get a home energy label. But part of the conversation with DOE early on and things we've learned through having conversations with places that have done home energy labeling programs is you don't want to sort of create this resource and train assessors and then have no one get a label and have assessors sit around for a year going, well, I took the training and then I didn't do anything. So our strategy in part with the pilots is to select people that are ready-made to start doing labeling. So a great example is we had a conversation with a nonprofit and they, over the next 18 months, will be going in and doing audits and making recommendations on 240 homes in a multi-county area. And they're interested in basically adding home energy labeling into that process so that when they go in and do an assessment, they get a home energy label, for the house. And the strategy in doing that is that we then get our home energy score assessors trained, we get them ready, and then they have work to go out and do. And then once we kind of have that level of, labeling happening, we are able to go out and use our stakeholder network to more broadly promote home energy scores and home energy labeling to people in South Carolina. And we have trained assessors ready to service that demand so that the two kind of sync up nicely. We give our initial assessors something to do by working in pilot programs initially, and then we're prepared to take on anyone that wants to do home energy labeling anywhere in the state. And we did create sort of a matrix of questions to ask our potential pilot projects that includes things as simple as like, do you have someone that has a pre-qualification credential already that could get trained to be an assessor, or do we have to find that person to service your program? Do you have programs that are touching homes and doing audits already, or would you have to go out and create a new line of work essentially in order to touch houses with labels? And that sort of matrix allows us to prioritize. Our highest priority is people that have someone on staff that can be trained to be an assessor and are already touching homes, and they can go out and they have the authority. So another question we have asked to just say, yes, we're doing home energy labeling. Because some people we're talking to, they would like to advocate for it, but they don't have the authority to make it happen. Other potential pilot projects, they have the ability to make it happen. So when assessing sort of the priority for a pilot project, it's like if you have assessors and you're touching homes and you have the authority to implement labeling into your programs, great. Like, absolutely, let's make this happen. If you're just interested in telling people about labeling, then we still want to talk to you, but you're better to help us disseminate information when the program is ready to launch, for anyone to get a label, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and you mentioned your stakeholder network. From what I've observed sort of from the outside with all of the work that you guys have been doing with your stakeholder engagement, you guys have been very sort of like intentional with that being, for the most part, a stakeholder driven process. And so I'm curious if you have any reflections or lessons learned on like the makeup of your stakeholder group, what that engagement has been like, and just how much you lean on them for program design decisions.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, yeah. I know early on in the process with a lot of the feedback we got in was just related to specific, like the energy label design that we worked on creating, I think starting in 2021 or 2022, and also just kind of different slides we went on, like training education needs and how the I guess sort of like envisioning what pilot projects could look like. So those are some things that we got feedback on and just continuous parts of the program.
Yeah, great. I've been just a quick tangent for me. Very, you guys are often an example I point to for states about like really co-designing the program and the label with your stakeholders. So props to you all for doing that. I do want to make sure we have time to sort of like reflect on a great question that came in, which was about if you have any advice for states or other jurisdictions about starting this process, if they have like an inkling of maybe doing something like this in their own area. So anyone on the panel that wants to take that one. Gilly, do you have any thoughts? Can we start with you?
Whoa. I
don't know if I have anything too much to add to that.
No worries, that's fine.
Yeah, I would rather hear from the folks that have actually implemented a labeling program, I think.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. Well, one thing for us, it was helpful having another partner take on the lead for being a program partner with DOE on the home energy score. That alleviates a lot of costs and staff time from the city to implement a program. And so I know in California, we're looking at doing a voluntary program across the state, which will allow other cities in California to kind of adopt programs underneath that. Oregon State has kind of a program across the state that allows their cities in that state to then adopt their own requirements. So that's probably from the city level, having someone else take on that program partner really helps with implementation and creating a underscore program.
I would say I came into this process working with South Carolina having zero experience with home energy scores or home energy labeling. I've been in energy efficiency and building energy codes for quite a while, but not engaged with DOE home energy score. And using the network of people out there to talk to folks at DOE, to talk to people in Oregon, to talk to people in Missouri, to talk to other state energy offices and folks at DOE about how this works and what they've done in other places to really just inform us in kind of our steps in the process, in things as simple as DOE saying, like, most importantly, focus on just getting people started doing labeling and don't build the infrastructure to support it and then have trained assessors sit around doing nothing. Like, right, those types of conversations really help you like think about like, well, what do we need to do to get from where we are to having labels on homes beyond just creating the technical capacity for that to happen, right? So use that network, ask those questions. There's people out there that have been doing this for decades. So talk to them. You know, that has been very helpful.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce the point that the network of home energy score partners is really the best resource that we have in terms of figuring out a way to build out your program.
Thank you for the unintentional but great segue into a link I just put into the chat, which is a map NASEO maintains of various labeling policies and programs at the state and local level. So check that out if any of them seem interesting or resonate with you. Happy to get you connected to the right folks. I think with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Will to see, one, if you have tips for folks if getting started in this space, or if you have any sort of like closing thoughts you want to leave us with.
Well, I think what everybody already said is worth tripling down on, which is, yeah, reach out to people with experience in the area already. So Gilly can attest, we have been bugging her for time regularly. Reached out to our local partners in Berkeley and Bay Ren, Stop Waste. So connected with all the great work that's happening there. But really, yeah, I think California is still in the beginning stages. We're very much in data gathering and listening mode, and appreciate all the contributions that have been made by the presenters. I did have one sort of bigger question to ask all the brain trust that's here today that I think it would benefit the listeners in today. Is, in California, we're hyper focused on the concept that there are various elements of a home energy rating and label, but there are probably some more important than others in correlating with increased real estate values and transaction costs. So I'm quite curious at the presenters' opinions on what they feel like those tenets are in assuring that the homes that we care dearly about with energy efficiency and solar and heat pumps and all this stuff are actually being valued more in the market.
I'll jump in first. So I think that the best way to value home efficiency in the market is, one, to have that documentation of what's been done, but two, to prioritize the updates that are transferable between owners. I might install a smart thermostat and use that on a regular basis, but someone who moves in after me might not exactly know how to use it, those kinds of things. So I would say that the most transferable updates are where we need to start, and I think where we should send a signal to the market that is where the value lies in all of these updates.
Any thoughts from South Carolina or you in Berkeley?
Yeah, so for us in Berkeley, I mean, our home values are just a lot different than other places in the country. And so we haven't seen, it hasn't had a large, high score, low score hasn't had a big impact on home sales. Granted, moving forward with requirements, that the home energy score then would put the value on, is if the home gets a 10, then it needs less it'll need less upgrades through the requirements. And so then we probably would see a shift for higher scoring homes, selling at, marginally higher prices, than lower scoring homes that would need more work and have to complete more upgrades.
I would say not South Carolina specific, but just this question about how the value of energy efficiency improvements gets recognized in real estate transactions is a conversation that's been going on as long as I've been involved in, building energy codes. And it's a challenge, and nobody has a silver bullet. But I think that, Gilly's point that like a standardized way to capture the documentation of what has been done on the home is probably the most important like piece of the puzzle. Like if you don't have that, then you've got wild, wild west. If you've got a standardized way to collect and document the improvements in the home and the reduction in utilities that those improvements, bring, then at least you've got the information you need to add that into the conversation about, the market value of those improvements.
Thanks for that. I've got, I don't know if everyone has their on the chat, but I've got folks saying, keep it simple. All right, I'll turn it over to you again, Will. Any questions or thoughts or requests?
Smart that you and Gilly and others know I always have questions, so you can always come back to me infinite times. Another topic that's of interest to me is in South Carolina. You talked a lot about sort of the assessor network and trying to build sort of a meaningful profession here for people to do as opposed to sitting, twiddling their thumbs. In my initial outreach to real estate professionals, and it's very initial, all they told me was, whatever you do, don't increase the transaction costs. Don't add costs to housing. Don't add costs to disclosures. So question I have to you all is, how do you do that? How do you provide a meaningful profession that incents people to want to do these assessments and provide labels without transferring over the cost to a buyer or seller?
I'll have to come off mute. Michael, I don't know if you have any specific thoughts on that. It's a very good question. I guess that's not the question people are asking us right now because we have a voluntary program. So I think two things are true. If you looked at a user who just wanted to get a home energy score, they're coming at it because they're looking for a way to get good information about how to improve their home's energy efficiency, right? And the home energy score and the label can provide that. You might have other users who are really interested in the equity space, and they're trying to do something like maybe what was done in Gainesville, and they want their community to create, some sort of requirement for disclosures that helps protect the people who are, receiving the greatest burden of, cost of utilities in their rental property, right? So, the idea of, and the last thing I'll say is, in creating a voluntary statewide infrastructure to support Home Energy Score is a very affordable way to get access to this type of information about your house. It is more affordable than doing an individual HERS rating, for example. It may be higher cost than a utility based program, but it's giving you access to a larger network of information and plugging you into DOE Home Energy Score while still being, very, very low cost. So because we don't currently have mandates that are like making people do labeling, then the question of like, how much does labeling cost, or how is that cost being transferred onto homeowners, isn't something that we're necessarily tackling right now. I would think in Berkeley, there might be a bigger conversation about like, I have to do this, but it costs money, that creates a burden for me. But to your point, on $1.5 million home, I don't know how many people are complaining about that, like, right? So Berkeley is its unique animal, I guess.
Yeah, Gilly, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Do you recall any conversation about this from Portland or other Oregon cities that are dealing with this same issue?
well, I know that a lot of folks utilize, rebates to cover the cost.
Yeah.
But I think, it is one of those sticking points that a lot of jurisdictions have. It's like how do we implement this without raising essentially closing costs for folks? And whether that's through rebates or sometimes we have it's not part of home sale requirements, but in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, all of those home energy scores are fully covered by the partner. So there are other ways to finance it besides just homeowner financing. Still not a great answer, but those are the options that I've seen so far.
Yeah, and if anyone has any great answers, please feel free. Did you want to add anything from Berkeley, or did we about capture it, that this is like a pretty small percentage of the budget that we're working with here?
Yeah, we are making a shift right now. We do allow that home energy score to be deferred to the buyer. And so that helps kind of alleviate the cost question, because then sellers weren't on the hook for, if they're selling as is and they're low income sellers, then they're kind of not on the hook for covering the cost of the assessment. So then buyers would then cover it as part of, the purchase of the home. But we are getting rid of that deferral option, and we are looking at ways to offset that assessment cost for low-income homeowners. So that way they're not bearing the burden of a home energy score. And in Berkeley, it's about $300 is about the average cost of our kind of home energy scores.
Thanks for that. Got just a couple minutes left. So, Will, do you want to take our last minute or so for any other questions for the panel?
I actually had a question
yeah.
that just popped in my mind. It's sort of talking about like creating this market. Like there's 500 homes a year in Berkeley, and there's a $300 cost. That's like $150,000 a year in transaction costs that are happening around. And you said you've got 28 assessors. Who are those assessors? Like, are they home appraisers? Are they, inspectors? Are they with utility programs? Who are most of those assessors?
Wide range. And so essentially we have a larger pool of assessors for the entire Bay Area. And so for Berkeley, we require people to have a Berkeley business license, have a little bit more requirements, and so we maintain a list. Ours, we have home inspectors are kind of a chunk of those, equipment installers. And so we have heat pump installers. This is like one of their offerings for other things too. And they just also do real estate home energy scores. And then, there's like home assessors that is now kind of a market that are not part of installers or part of, home inspectors, but do home energy scores and other type of home energy audits. And so that's kind of a new niche that's kind of become here in Berkeley and the Bay Area in general.
Exciting to hear that this sounds like a sustainable business model for some. Okay, with that, we are at time. So I want to thank all of our panelists for making the time to be here. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with everybody. I'll share the slides and contact information with the group for anyone that wants to do follow-up, and feel free to reach out to me and Alana here at NASEO if you've got any questions or concerns. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, and hope to see you back here on another NASEO call soon. Thanks, everybody.